Hole in a Box by C.S.R.
Chapter 2. Billy Saw a Monster. That night, Marla had laid her head on her pillow, feeling a sort of restlessness. It was not uncommon for Marla to get very little sleep. She suffered from insomnia, and when she could sleep, she usually had no dreams, and when she did dream, she was faced with nightmares. Though tonight, she felt overwhelmed by her discovery. The ideas of fantasy and adventure were rocking her to sleep in the bunk bed that she lay upon. Marla's little top eyelids stopped fluttering and fighting, and started to drop down onto their bottom counterparts. Just as her eyes were about to shut, her heart started to race as she felt a baffling presence enter the world. She wasn't entirely sure what it was, or if it was just from being half asleep. But Marla knew something had just happened. She sat up, her bangs brushing against the ceiling until she hunched her back as to not hit her head. Marla took a moment to analyze the presence. It wasn't within her room, but it seemed to be close, somewhere within the orphanage. Suddenly, her heart stopped as the company she had felt disappeared into the night, and Marla once again felt alone. She gave out one of her many sighs and laid her head back on her pillow. She rolled to her left, clenching what she could, and dozed off into a slumber. Marla overheard a girl named Kayla talking.
Did you hear what Billy said?
She was picking up a platter of food and getting ready to find a table for breakfast.
Yeah, what a weirdo,
a boy named Jacob replied. Suddenly, Marla's curiosity reached a peak again as she wanted to know more, but she knew she couldn't just ask. Marla went to an isolated spot at a table near a few people to be able to hear the clusters of conversation without seeming like she was part of it. She was near two girls about her age named Jessica, acted very sweet around adults but was quite sour and judgmental, and her best friend Ashley, obviously a follower, who seemed to just start a conversation about the previous night.
Billy saw a monster. Or at least, that's what I heard he said from Johnny.
Jessica said bluntly. Marla's ears were burning and itching with anticipation.
A monster?
Her thoughts were running wild.
In which room, I wonder? Johnny sleeps in room 7. Does Billy also sleep in there?
Ashley responded after seeming to realize something.
So that's what happened. Daniel said he nearly woke the whole room. He was freaking out. Jeez, what a scaredy cat. Monsters don't exist. He probably saw some shadow outside or something.
Johnny and Daniel, they share a room. It couldn't be coincidence, right? Billy saw something in room 7. That's where I found the box. Room 7. Room 7. Room 7.
Or
Jessica continued to add on.
He's just saying things to get attention.
Ashley replied.
What a freak. Saying he saw monsters is only getting him laughed at.
Seeing monsters? What a liar.
I heard they made him go to the counselor.
Marla kept her head down during the entire conversation. All she could think about was room 7. She almost lifted her head to ask the girls if Billy slept in room 7 as well, but knew it would be foolish.
Oh, look.
Jessica grew more alert in her seat and pointed a finger.
It's him.
At the end of the direction at which Jessica's finger was pointed was little Billy himself. Scrawny fellow with curly blonde hair and big round glasses. He seemed nervous, and he should be. Billy had just set himself up to be the next main victim to bullying. The thought somewhat eased Marla's mind, since she used to be number 1, and was now demoted to number 2. But she also felt somewhat bad for the boy and some sympathy for him despite the fact that he had bullied her in the past. Everyone had bullied Marla more than once at this orphanage, which was quite amazing since Marla had been in many orphanages and foster homes before this one in her first 11, soon to be 12 years of life. At seeing the boy, Marla gave out another one of her breaths and looked away to eat her tasteless and dry food.
Best not to let him catch me looking at him.
The girl thought as she dug her fork into her food.
See any monsters lately, Billy?
Marla heard a condescending voice call across the room.
Vicious, all of them. They're all vicious.
Another child called out in a supercilious tone.
I hope none of the monsters get you later on.
All of them. So cruel.
Look,
Came another haughty voice.
is that a monster over there?
Why can't they leave it be?
Someone else joined in patronizingly saying,
What's wrong, Billy? Don't see any more monsters?
What's wrong with us? What's wrong with you people?
More and more voices joined in, one saying,
I'll show you a monster.
making Marla's head jerk up ever so slightly to get an image of the poor blonde boy ready to tear up. Some of the children, presumably started by the last voice, began to throw food at Billy. Marla's head sank back down, her eyes glued to her food that remained on her plate.
Terrible. Terrible. All of it just so terrible.
It was art time for the children, and Marla found herself sketching what her little mind could conceive as a monster. It was greatly detailed and somewhat grotesque. The creature that had made its way onto her page had many sharp teeth, large pointed claws, an absence of eyes, and large bat-like wings. She truly was gifted, but the child would never share her art with anyone. She learned better than that.
You believe me?
Marla suddenly heard a voice say over her. Her hand quickly moved over her sketch that she started to color. Marla's little hazel eyes peered up to see Billy's clear blue ones peering down at her.
A freak like you has to.
Marla remained silent. She did believe him. Maybe. The monster could have come out of her new favorite box that she had just unlocked the evening that the said monster had appeared. Marla's eyes rolled and set back to her paper.
Well, why didn't you say it?
She had a great reason not to. It would all backfire on her. Oh, she can make this friend, saying she believed him and try to help track down the monster and prove him right, only to fail, and him to point all fingers at her, saying that she is, and always has been, the weird one, confusing everyone to think she started the monster rumors, and they'd all go along with it like a bunch of puppets. Marla sighed and shook her head, and thought to herself,
Sorry, Billy. I'm not interested in another fair-weather friend. Not again.
she had one too many of those. Too many broken promises and backs turned on her. Like a girl so young could deal with it anymore, but not enough apologies and assurance that it'd never happen again. Not enough friends who'd stood by her, thick and thin. That'd be a miracle. Billy continued to pester her, but Marla wouldn't budge and seemed to ignore the boy. Once he realized his efforts were futile, Billy lurched away, muttering insults about her. Once break time had come around, Marla found herself sneaking into one of the boys' bedrooms. Room number 7 to be exact. She brought her pail, more than likely from age as it was used before she had got it. Yellow satchel that held her Polaroid camera. A gift she had got for Christmas, meaning that this item was used and cheap as well, but would do in satisfying her. And pencil. Marla stealthily made her way to the closet. She'd need to be quick and cautious. This was a girl in a room meant for boys without any real beneficial purpose, meaning that she really didn't want to get caught. Marla pulled the box out from the closet and her camera from her satchel. She pointed the Polaroid at her face and tried to manage a smile while clicking the button, instantly blinding herself for a moment or so. Marla picked up her photo and shook it out until she could see the image. There on the canvas was an 11-year-old girl. Her dark auburn hair, unruly and disobedient to a hairbrush. Her eyes were small and beady, reflecting a hazel color. Making contrast on her very pale skin were sets of light blackish purplish bags underneath her hazels, which never seemed to go away. The girl's nose seemed to reflect some genes of maybe someone Greek, as it had pointed down, but showed a small bump in her bridge. As to top that off, she had some acne growing on it. Her smile looked a little forced, but somewhat sincere with just a touch of excitement. As excited as a sleep-deprived looking person could be. She wore a black turtleneck, her favorite combination with her blue jeans and red sneakers. That looked very fitting on the young girl. Her face was covered with a good amount of subtle beauty marks. A big dark one on her chin, a tiny dark one on her left cheek near her lips, one on her right cheek near her eyes, and 2 tiny light ones on her left cheek, just barely to be seen. Marla liked the little self-portrait of her. It was very simple and very true. She turned the photograph around and started to write on it.
Hello, my name is Marla. I'm an 11-year-old human girl. I am very interested to meet one of you and to know about your world.
Marla looked at her note and felt very disappointed in herself. She loved books and writing and the English language. It was one of the things she got bullied for because some kids are intimidated by those smarter than them. or are just not smart enough to understand the gift of the other child's wisdom. But her note did not reflect that at all. It was very boring and not showing much intelligible features, but for all she knew, the creatures on the other side might not even know English. And besides, she didn't need to impress them with her writing, did she? Also, she was lucky it was legible, for her handwriting was terrible for the most part any other day. And being diagnosed with dyslexia really explained why. Marla damned it all and decided to leave it be. She reached for the box and eagerly opened it to find a very big surprise. The hole was gone. Or rather, there was now a bottom to the box. Marla's heart felt crushed. Had it all been her imagination?
Maybe the box can only open at certain times.
Marla said out loud to herself to fill her head with hope. Now feeling hesitant, she placed her photo note in the box, wishing that no one would find it and remove it.
Please work.
She placed the box back into its place and stood up after grabbing her camera and pencil. She'd stayed long enough and was ready to leave before anyone caught her here. Marla would have grabbed the box, but there wasn't enough time for her to put it into her room. While walking out, she placed her items back in the satchel and made her way down the hall as if nothing ever happened. Once more, Marla found herself in her bed, aching with anxiety to keep her awake from excitement, but feeling a tiredness creep onto her body to take control. Tonight would be similar to the one before, except this time, when her heart raced, she heard a shriek echo from down the hall. It was Billy screaming.
It's the monster! It's the monster!
All the girls in her room soon found themselves awakened by the yells and howls of their fellow orphan. Some even sat up in their beds, and others, including Marla, got up to go to room 7 to see what was happening. As Marla reached the glorified room 7, she could see that a bunch of adults and other boys and girls had made their way to the room. She also discovered that Billy slept on the bottom bunk closest to the closet, which explained a lot to her if her suspicions were true. In all the panic, no one noticed she slipped her way through the crowd in her long white nightgown, all the way to the closet. She quickly picked up the box and once again glided out of the room, calling no attention to herself. Marla was walking down the hall to her room, passing many other orphans when she had opened the box. There still was a bottom, but her photographic note was gone. She sighed and wasn't sure whether or not to smile at this or worry. She made her way into her room, being ignored by anyone who stayed as she climbed up her ladder. No one took notice to her or the box. It wasn't until later, when the other girls had come back, that the ones who stayed became inquisitive. Marla just laid her head on her pillow as she cuddled her box. Once all was quiet, and Marla was sure all the girls in the room were asleep, she sat up in her bed and brought the box onto her lap. She was shaken with fear that it would remain the same, but she had to sate her curiosity. She needed to know if anything changed in the box. So with a dash of hesitance, Marla's prying fingers opened the lid once more and found a hole in the box.